It is 6 o'clock on my end of things, so I am gonna kick this off. Hello, everybody. My name is Sunita Vanderloo. I she, her, hers pronouns, and I work with MN350 as our transportation organizer. And this is our Introduction to Electric School Buses for Districts webinar. And so we have a really stacked agenda tonight, and lots of incredible speakers. But also with MN350, how we kick off all of our meetings is by reading a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to do that first, and then I'll kind of kick us into the rest of our agenda. So I'm going to pull that up super shortly. Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry. The page disappeared on me. All right. A call to action for Indigenous communities. While land acknowledgements are intended to be respectful, they oversimplify complex tribal histories and fail to recognize the ongoing impacts of colonialization that tribal communities continue to live with to this day. In place of a land acknowledgement, we ask that you support Indigenous communities by taking action. We ask that you give land back to tribes, protect the environment and wild rice. Tribal cultures depend on them. Insist that the United States respects tribal sovereignty and upholds its trust responsibility to tribes, which includes appropriate levels of federal funding to support tribal needs. Many promises to tribes still need to be kept. Elect officials and judges that understand tribal governments, relationships, and law. Invest in tribal economies. Challenge and reject all stereotypes about Indigenous people. Insist that your children and grandchildren are taught accurate information about the histories, cultures, and contemporary lives of Indigenous peoples in your school system, and inform yourself about the issues impacting Indigenous communities and speak up. The sovereignty, well-being, cultures, and languages of Indigenous peoples are born of their homelands, and that makes these lands and waters precious to Native communities. All of us have the responsibility to treat them with the respect and care that they deserve and to steward them carefully for the next generations. Please do your part. Thank you. Okay, awesome. I've been able to kick us off then, and I'm going to reshare my screen. And awesome, here we go. So again, for folks just joining, my name is Nina Vanderloo, and I'm going to be facilitating today, and I work with MN350. So this is kind of our run of show. As you can see, we have a pretty stacked group of amazing different speakers. We'll sort of go in the order of environmental impacts, and then we'll get to hear from economic and rural impacts from Hoglund Bus Company, the health impacts from health professionals for healthy climate. We'll get to hear from a staff member with EPA Region 5. And then closing it out, we get to hear from a school board member on ways that districts can take action. So just to go over really quick, our speakers along with the etiquette for Zoom, just because I'm so excited I can't see everyone's face right now, but so excited for everyone to be on. If you could please mute yourself upon entering the call, just so that way the speakers have the full room, and sometimes background noise can be distracting for folks. But please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat by saying your name, your location, and then also if you know your school district. So example, I would say my name is Sunita Vanderloo. I live in St. Paul, and then St. Paul Public Schools is my school district. You can feel free to keep your camera on or off during presentations, whatever will make you the most comfortable. And we will be having our Q&A portion of the evening after all of our speakers are done talking. But Rachel, who is with Health Professionals for Healthy Climate, and they threw a little note in the chat, but they will be sort of keeping track of those questions and answers. So if there's a question when someone's presenting, you can just throw it in the chat when you think of it, and then we'll follow back up at the later end of the presentation. And then additionally, if you need closed captions for whatever reason, please click the CC Captions button at the bottom of your screen. And these are our speakers on the slide right here. We've got Daphne, who is an air quality specialist with the EPA Region 5. Joshua Erdman, I'm so sorry if I said that incorrectly. He's a sales expert with Hoglund Bus Company. We have Dr. Dan Trujano. He is with, he's MDA, MBA, and he is with Health Professionals for Healthy Climate. And then we have Brooke Roper, who is a school board member of the Hopkins Public School District, ISD 270. And then I will also be speaking for a little bit. But I will sort of be covering quickly the environmental impacts to kind of set things up. And then I'm also going to talk about all the exciting opportunities that we have this year for electric school bus funding. So MN350, we are an environmental nonprofit. And so what we focus a lot on is how to mitigate and create more sustainable solutions in a world that's facing climate change. So that's why I'm covering the environmental impacts tonight. So air pollution caused by vehicles is actually the United States' biggest singular contributor to global warming. And it also disproportionately affects the young, old, and low-income and communities of color. So electrifying the entire fleet of United States school buses would also reduce greenhouse gas emissions and could create a tipping point for decarbonizing the entire United States transport sector, with it being responsible for almost 40% of the nation's greenhouse gas emissions, which is pretty crazy, considering that that is almost 50% and over a quarter of the total greenhouse gas emissions we make as a nation. And actually replacing all of America's school buses with electric buses could avoid an average of 5.3 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions each year alone, which is equivalent to taking about 1 million cars off the road. And that's kind of why here at MN350, when we're looking at electrifying our transportation fleet, that's why we're looking at school buses, because they fall under the bucket of medium and heavy duty vehicles. And so even if we were to electrify all of the cars within Minnesota, if we still had these buses, from school buses to transit to semis, if they were still running through the state and emitting running off of diesel or gas and emitting greenhouse gases, then we wouldn't fully achieve our state goals. And then also, even when accounting for the emissions from electricity production, actually electric school buses generate considerably fewer greenhouse gas emissions than buses that are run on propane and diesel. Since I know there's lots of different other sustainable energy forms, but we prioritize electric because electric is the only one that does not emit any pollutants into the air that could harm individuals' health along with the planet. So those are some of the environmental impacts of diesel school buses. And now I just am going to touch briefly on Minnesota's history with electric school buses in the past. So in 2022, the Biden administration, going to take us back one more year. In 2021, the Biden administration passed the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. So that is IIJA, which is the acronym that is sitting right here. And that was seen as the biggest piece of federal policy that is prioritizing funding to help combat climate change, which is really exciting. And so from that funding, the EPA, which stands for the Environmental Protection Agency, was given through this act $5 billion to be spent over 5 fiscal years. And I'm not going to go too much into detail on all of it, since we have a pro who works with the EPA staff on the call tonight, and she'll be covering this. But this was split into 2 programs, the Rebate and the Grant program. And how we like to look at things here is sort of, because this will be spent over 5 fiscal years, it goes from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 26. Each year is kind of like a round. And so each round is about $1 billion is spent between those 2 programs, so the rebate and the grant program. So in 2022, the EPA opened up the rebate program first because these programs do not exist at the same time. And Minnesota had sent in 30 applications for the rebate program, and 4 of those school districts were selected. Meanwhile, 25 schools remain on the wait list. And 4 of those school districts were selected, but Minnesota only ended up getting 3 electric school buses because one of the districts ended up actually pulling out. And so we definitely didn't do well for our region, and are really looking forward to having hopefully one of the best comebacks. Really, I feel like bouncing back from 3 is a doable thing for us. And so then in 2023, the rebate program has closed, and then the EPA in the spring, late spring, in around May, they had opened up their grant program, which is less competitive, or no, sorry, it's less competitive, but a longer, oh no, I'm so sorry, I'm mixing up my words. It's more competitive. And then it also additionally is a longer application process, and that was open all the way through August. And so Minnesota had sent in 25 applications, and then on top of this, actually Minnesota received 13 electric school buses, which is really exciting. And for folks who, unfortunately, I haven't been able to check the chat, but if there's any folks in the room, like I'm from St. Paul Public School District, they got buses. If there's anyone on the call right now from Minneapolis, Minneapolis Public Schools got buses. So this was really exciting for the Twin Cities Metro to be able to start to see the deployment of these buses. Because as I mentioned before, electrifying our school bus fleet is also a social justice issue, since there are communities within the East Phillips neighborhood in Minneapolis and other BIPOC communities that face 5 times the 5 times the air pollution rate and asthma than the rest of the state, which is pretty telling, especially since it is such a small little pocket of Minneapolis. So that's why it's really important to get those buses into those communities, so those kids are able to breathe along with the community's clean air. And so then also in 2023, during the Minnesota legislative session, a group of organizations, many of them are on this call tonight, MN350, Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate, the 100% Campaign, and others, helped pass an electric school bus grant program that will allocate $13 million attached to it, and that'll be deployed through the Department of Commerce. That'll get Minnesota around 30 electric school buses. Now, this part, so sorry, I know it's a lot of text, but this is kind of why we're having this webinar right now, because as you can see, 2024 is going to be a very big year for electric school buses for Minnesota. Just yesterday, the EPA closed out the 2nd round of their rebate program, and we should get an announcement of those in the coming months. The EPA then will have their 2nd round of their grant program. Daphne can probably expand on when this will happen. And we've heard an expected announcement of that program to be in the spring of 2024. Like I had just mentioned, the Department of Commerce they have hired on an individual, which is really exciting, to help deploy their 13 million electric school bus grant program. So that's another opportunity, and that is a state-only program. So that means that all the school districts within Minnesota are just competing with each other versus with the federal programs. It's the entire United States. And that's not even where it stops with the state programs. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has had different phases of their Volkswagen settlement phases, and we are in the final phase now. It is still yet to be completely announced sort of what they're doing, but we are in the phase 3 of finalizing the plan on how they're going to spend the final 14 million of the Volkswagen settlement. And so I've included on this slide the draft of what that plan is going to look like. And as you can see, there is about 2.1 million allocated for electric school buses, and then 2.1 million for electric vehicle charging stations. Definitely, this is a number that we'd love to see increase, and it's something that we can kind of work on, but either way, this is another exciting state opportunity. And also, school districts can apply to these programs. There's lots of different options. One, just because they apply to one doesn't mean they can't apply to the other. And then finally, Excel is having their transportation electrification plans. And so they are planning on rolling out a electric school bus demonstration pilot program, which will allocate about 2 electric school buses. We'd love to see more in the future. And this will be to test out the vehicle to grid technology through demonstrations, including those 2 electric school buses through this summer months. So that's another opportunity. And I think that we hopefully will hear more about that in the next few months, which is really exciting. And then finally, the 2024 legislative session. So also, I'll mention this at the end, but we're trying to continue the rhetoric around electric school buses. Even if funding isn't available this legislative session, that doesn't mean that we should let anybody forget about it or for them to forget the importance of promoting this. And so this can be done through educational hearings. This can be done through sending letters to your representatives, all sorts of stuff. So this is all, again, a really exciting year for electric school buses. This is a very big year overall, but it's a really exciting time to allocate and enjoy these funds, because also the Department of Commerce program, along with the EPA's program, is done by the fiscal year 2026. So that's why it's really important that districts prioritize and reap the benefits of these funds right now. So thank you so much for hearing my section of things. Again, like I had mentioned, with the participants, or after each participant is done, please feel free, if you have any questions, to throw them in the chat, and then we'll address them at the end. And then I am going to pass it over to Joshua to speak about his experience.
Okay, thank you. Let me pull my stuff up. Hey, I saw my my hometown there. I was Crow Wing County deputy, and I see ISD 181 is here. So hi. So up until last winter, I was a sheriff's deputy, specializing in corrections and officer training. I made the switch when moving down to Minneapolis to get out of law enforcement, and somehow ended up in school buses. And it's actually it's a weird twist because so much of it kind of intertwines. It's something I noticed right away when talking to people about the next gen school buses. They're fearful of them, right? Everybody, they're afraid of the new diesel buses. They're afraid of the new tech. They're afraid of the new electric. You say electric, and everybody gets scared. You know, so I sat down and I broke it down, like, you know, how would I explore a situation, you know, and it would be like the initial confrontation, theme development, handling denials, overcoming objections, and ultimately, you know, gaining trust and attention, you know, from the person. So if I break that down into trying to explain EV buses to people, it worked really well. It's something like I said, we've got an all new line. At least international. Our next gen is coming out. We'll start having them in Minnesota within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And you know, something I didn't realize until the first time I started talking to somebody about the next generation bus, and it was actually a diesel bus. They were fearful of it. I mean, but when I slowed down and I talked to the driver, he's had the same bus for 15 years, right? That's his kind of his family member. He loves this bus. Like, he doesn't care that it's, you know, you go to sit in the back and it leaks exhaust and it spews oil, and like, but this is his bus and he loves it. And people don't like change. So when you start talking about blind spot monitors, pedestrian braking, adaptive cruise, and of course, you know, the big electric scary boogeyman, like that's, you know, they get really fearful, like, oh, the tech's going to break. And we've all had new cars, and we've all had issues with them. So breaking that down, you know, into like, you know, what I've ran into is I might have a district rep or a school board member who wants an EV, right? Who wants a next gen bus, whether it's a low emission or a zero emission bus, but their school board doesn't. Their school board is fearful of it. Or, you know, I'll have a transportation director that likes it, but their superintendent doesn't. So sitting down and coming up with them with ways to really de-escalate and explain how EV is the future and really the better solution and a cost saving measure. And I do that pretty simply, like, breaking down, like, start talking to them about what cars they own, like, do you have blind spot monitoring on your car? What features do you think are better for buses to have? My favorite example is, if you had a 57 Chevy, would it be your daily driver in winter? you know um there's a lot of different techniques that I've used in that, and if people want to know more, they can feel free to ask me. Rural Minnesota too is one of those things where, I grew up in Nisswa, and we still have electric generators up there. We're fearful of electric. It goes down constantly. I mean, if we didn't have a generator and a gas powered chainsaw, we couldn't get out sometimes, and that's the fact to this day. So when you say electric school bus, people, well, it's going to break down, it's going to do this, I could probably talk at length of all the things that I've heard. A lot of negative. The first implementation of electric buses, I think, in Minnesota, we didn't know what we were doing. I wasn't in the industry then, but um, anytime there's something new, people make mistakes. A lot of it false, and again, a lot of it outdated. So trying to handle all that, just the denial people have when something is changing or shocking, and it's something that blew my mind the first time I brought up electric bus to somebody. I look at it as like, who here remembers this? And this blew my mind. School buses haven't been updated in 30 years, right? A bus that was sold last year and one that was sold 30 years ago, other than a couple, like an automatic transmission, like, that's it. That's the same old smoggy diesel smelling school bus you sat in the back of when you were a kid is what we're using now. And when I approach somebody on an electric bus, and talking about cleaner air, cleaner environment, better for the kids, especially waiting for the school bus, like, I felt I was the suspect. All of a sudden I was getting berated, with all these, well, it's going to break down, how do I charge this, and what about the batteries, and how do we recycle this, and it's not good for my routes. And again, not coming at them with, like, well, here's the facts, and being arrogant and shoving it down their throat, slowing down, like I would do when talking to somebody in law enforcement, and gathering facts and figuring out why they don't want to embrace this. And usually it comes down to fear and a lack of understanding. Like, I'll pick on International. Our first electric bus, we put an electric engine and stuff in a diesel bus. That's what we did. Then we spent the next 5.5 years developing a whole new bus from the ground up to specifically be electric. We're not just slapping an engine in a new one. A lot more tech is going into these. So yeah, there was problems. But what I hear is it's too new of tech. And if you look into it, I'm a history nerd. We've been using electric cars for over 100 years in the United States. It's just the range. We didn't have the range, so it's been a limited thing. And that's the next thing that comes up is, well, it won't work for my 130-mile route down a wet logging road. Good news, we don't want it to, right? That's not our plan right now. It will someday, right? But right now, let's look at a 20-30-mile route. Let's, plan it out. And the districts that have been implementing this are loving them. When they talk about, well, warming them up in cold weather, and just like a diesel bus, if you pre-trip them correctly, whether they're plugged in inside or outside, you have about the same distance. You lose maybe 15 to 20% of your mileage if you pre-trip correctly at 20 below. So it's no more different than a diesel bus. When they break down, we have roadside techs, we have everything like that. So it's just calming people down and going line by line why they're afraid and what they're afraid of. And usually everything you can kind of explain rationally. Especially like the end of life. That's one thing I have highlighted here is people are fearful of this. It's going to cost $50,000 or $100,000 to recycle them. I mean, the the research you do, there's electric motors that have been in use since the 1940s that we're still fixing and working. All the raw elements in the batteries, EVs are recycled at 65 to 75% life. So it's not like it's going to the landfill. So another company is buying it and utilizing it for their purposes. So again, all those fears, that I encounter, um, it's just fear of the unknown is really what it comes down to, and just slowing down and explaining the process. And when I look at a snapshot of like the next 5 to 10 years, really, whether we like it or not, zero emission and low emission vehicles are coming. They're not going away. They're going to get better. Um, and we can start embracing it now, or we can panic and be stuck well behind while hurting our environment. So, that being said, I was in law enforcement. So my favorite joke is whether you like it or not, you're coming with me, you know, um, we're going into the future together. So.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Joshua. Really appreciate your expertise, and also your connection too with rural districts, being able to meet people where they are. I think that is super important. So next, also, again, if people have questions for Joshua specifically or something else that's already been said, again, I've seen that a few questions have floated into the chat already, and just continue to do so. And we'll have a question and answer section at the end. But yes, thank you so much. Just lost my mouse. Oh, I really just lost my mouse. Oh, okay. Sorry, I found it again. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Dan Trujano.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Joshua, for coming and for actually, I know you're working along the rural areas and spreading the good news about this opportunity to get electric school buses. Yeah, my name is Dan Trujano. I am a retired physician, but currently a part-time professor at the University of Minnesota and University of St. Thomas in healthcare, business, finance, and economics. And I spend a lot of my time volunteering on advocacy for health and climate, and serve on the board of health professionals for healthy climate. If you go to the next slide, I know there was a question out there, and I think it's Milan. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correct. I think we've met before, asked about the ROI, and I think I want to address that because I know you have to go. It's hard to know what your return on investment will be because there's a lot of factors in there, and particularly if you get a significant amount of grant or rebate funding to cover that bus, and priority districts can actually get almost a free bus in some instances. So, I mean, the return on investment there is going to be quite obvious, right? But what we are seeing in real life experience in other Midwest states is that, and it depends on your utility rates and other factors, but they are seeing between $4,000 to $11,000 of savings per electric bus per year in fuel and maintenance costs compared to their diesel buses. And then we are seeing in other states too, and I think Sunita mentioned that Excel is now going to pilot this, but this is reality, is that those buses aren't just transportation vehicles for some districts. They are actually assets. Those bus batteries are assets, and they're partnering with utility companies to do that vehicle to grid. And actually in the summertime, when schools are perfect for this, because when air conditioners are running hot in the summer, and school buses aren't being used, they can use those batteries as storage, actually help peak demand, the highest cost energy we have. And this is reality in several states already. And Beverly, Massachusetts did a study of the past couple summers where they're actually selling back about $12,500 of energy per bus per summer to the utility company in Massachusetts. Again, I can't calculate an ROI for you. I think your business office would have to take a lot of factors in, what deal you have with the utility, the charging costs, and what kind of rebates or grant funding you are getting per bus, which can be significant. But over the lifetime of the bus, particularly if you get a free bus, I think the ROI is quite obvious. If you get a significant rebate or grant, it will likely pay off, but I cannot tell you you know, how long that ROI is. That's something that each individual school would have to work with your finance company or a contractor, right? There are groups like Highland Fleets out there that do these calculations for schools and help them apply and help them operate those buses. But it is a great question, and I think if you get grant funding or rebate funding, you'll likely see that the return is good. So I'm going to take my professor of business hat off and actually talk a little bit more about the doctor and me about why do we want to electrify school buses, not just from a financial reason, from a technology reason, but from a health and a educational reason. And this is a slide where some of us, Brooke is going to speak as well, who's in the slide. My wife, Dr. Paula Thompson, is here too. We actually testified last legislative session and to help get $13 million more of Minnesota-specific funding for school buses. And as Sunita said, that will fund probably over 30 more electric school buses and have hundreds of more kids like CJ there, pictured with Brooke, who actually has asthma. And that is one of the main reasons I, as a physician, am really excited about now zero emission school buses. If you go to the next slide, Sunita, I just want to tell you, when a few years ago, when someone approached me and said, hey, you want to start doing some efforts around electric school buses, I really didn't know anything about what that means or what the technology is or the studies or research behind, diesel emissions in school buses. So I first said, with me as a scientist and a physician, I said, well, let me just do some research and I'll get back to you. And quickly, when I began to do that literature research on the really compelling randomized studies out there, I said, wow, this is a children's health issue. It is a children's academic learning issue, as well as an environmental health issue. And I said, yeah, we really need to get more schools looking at zero emission electric buses. So a couple studies here are referenced, and they're in the slides as well. And those are active links if you want to actually look at the details of those studies. But two large randomized studies showed that children actually learn better, they breathe better, they miss less school, they're healthier if they are exposed to less diesel school bus emissions. So one of those studies was done in Georgia. It's like 500,000 kids were randomized on buses, and Georgia does a lot of regular just testing, academic testing, as well as fitness testing on those kids. And those kids that were riding with less diesel emission exposure had better academic test scores, particularly in English, and particularly the younger elementary school kids who are most impacted by breathing those fumes. And in that aerobic capacity testing, they actually had better fitness and aerobic capacity compared to those kids that were exposed to more diesel fumes. A similar study done out in Washington State, actually, it was more medical oriented. They actually looked at lung function tests and absenteeism. Kids that were exposed to less diesel emissions, 8% less absenteeism. They attended school more often because they weren't sick. And especially kids with asthma, but all kids had better medical lung function tests, lung capacity tests. And asthma is actually an inflammatory disease of the lungs. And, the asthma specialists will do exhaled nitric oxide testing that shows inflammation. They had less inflammation in their lungs. They missed less school. And asthma is the #1 chronic disease of children. So if you're riding a school bus that's packed with a bunch of kids, there's likely a handful of kids that have an underlying diagnosis of asthma on that school bus. And they are going to do significantly better in attending school. They're going to breathe better. They'll have less need to go to the doctor or emergency room or be hospitalized with their asthma. And kids like Corey and Brooke's going to speak about that as well. But CJ in that first picture, he's one that came home from school with, after riding on a diesel bus and just wasn't breathing right. So those are real impacts of getting away from emissions into zero emission electric school buses. If you go to the next slide, Sunita. And then, we as physicians and public health folks, we all know this, right? Climate change is the biggest health threat facing humanity. World Health Organization knows this. You read the New England Journal, you read the journal in the Lancet, you see the CDC website. We all know this. And this is one fairly significant way of decreasing carbon emissions that not only impact the community, but impact the climate. Every school bus produces about 90 tons of carbon per diesel school bus. And Cindy said, once we get to electric school buses in the US, that's 5.3 million less tons of carbon in the atmosphere every year, which is significant. So next slide, Anita. And this gets to, the question about ROI. I can't tell you the ROI. You gotta work with your business office or with some consulting firm that will tell you, okay, with your electric rates and with this rebate or this financing, and you can actually stack financing and working with the utility company, and they're going to set up some vehicle to grid. There is likely a very positive return on investment in a very short period of time if you get the right funding and you set up the right relationships with utility on charging rates and on vehicle to grid. But I can't tell you that's something each individual school will have to do. But again, those aren't theoretical. That vehicle to grid is actually working in multiple states right now, and hopefully we'll see that working with Xcel Energy as they start to pilot this in the next coming years. Next slide, Anita.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second.
Oh, that's okay. It's probably I just made that. I don't know, a couple new slides there, but anyway, so this is what I think, and I will. If you're a leader in the schools, school board member, administrator, teacher, you have power to champion this effort. It is a children's health benefit issue. It is a children's academic issue. And that's your role as someone who is a leader in that school, is to help kids breathe better, live healthier, and learn better. I think we have a ways to go in Minnesota to actually spread the good word. And I love it that Joshua is out there doing that in Hoglund's areas of interest, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. But other states are ahead of us in that. And even, states with a lot of rural communities like Michigan, they got millions of dollars in that first round of funding compared to, the 4 buses we got. And the second round of funding, Illinois, this is just the first round of rebates. Illinois got like over 150 school buses in the most recent grant round, which is great for them. But we can also be applying for that many school buses and getting them here in Minnesota. That's going to help our kids breathe better and learn better. Next slide, Sunita. And I just put this together. It's not out of necessarily lack of interest. There are a lot of schools applying for a lot of buses in that national program and in the MPCA program. It's just that there's not enough funding to meet the demand, and other states are actually applying much more than we are. But over the past several years, we've applied for 225 electric bus grants and rebates, and just most recently in that grant round, received several more. So we're getting more and more. So we have, on my analysis, about 33 electric school buses that have been awarded or are driving in the streets, or have been awarded and will be purchased here in the next year or two. And we're going to see more and more of these in Minnesota. So I'm so glad that we were able to get $13 more billion passed last legislative session. It's going to get us 30 more or so. But we need more, and we need more Minnesota schools to apply for the funds that are available for the next couple of years. There's still, I think, $2.5 billion sitting out there in the federal funds, but there is high demand for these things. And if we don't apply, other states will, and they'll get that money. But I think we are just as deserving as those other states in Michigan and Illinois and Wisconsin that are actually getting more buses than Minnesota schools. And our kids suffer asthma. Our kids here in Minnesota, want to learn better. So let's get our schools out there applying for it. And if you are a school leader, champion this in your school. We've seen this in other states where it's the school board members that are saying, hey, we are demanding these things. The administration, the superintendent is saying, hey, we need to look at this. Or transportation director is saying, hey, superintendent, look at this. We can get billions of dollars to fund brand new school buses. And anyone can bring this forward, but it takes someone to step in there and say, yeah, that is my job, to help our kids learn, to help our kids live healthier. That's my job, and I'm going to do this. Not say, oh, it's just the transportation folks that are looking at, or we contract the transportation, they have to decide. No, you as a school board member can actually step into that space and say, our kids need to breathe better, our kids need to live healthier, and we need to get on and apply for these electric school buses so we can get them in that healthier transportation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Yes, no, I completely agree. It is a really exciting opportunity. But again, we need leadership from all angles. And I think this is a great transition, actually, Dan's last slide, into our next speaker. So I will pass it over to Daphne, who is with the Environmental Protection Agency.
Hey everybody, I'm Daphne. I'm the Minnesota Clean School Bus Coalition Lead with EPA Region 5. I'm sure, as you all know, we just closed our rebate program yesterday, and I will provide an update on that. I provide this table just as a refresher for what we are covering with the cost of the buses and for the priority and non-priority school districts. So the prioritization criteria, I didn't include it here, but it is on our website. Essentially, it applies to those low-income areas and schools that meet the Title I funding, and rural schools and BIA funded schools. So there's more language on that on our website if you want to go through and check if you are a priority school. We also have a document where you can self-certify for priority school. And so just like heads up there for the next rebate round. So with the rebates, we kind of propose this as a kind of beginner level of getting your foot out the door with electric buses. We're funding up to 25 buses versus like the grant program, where you can have a higher fleet transition between like 25 to 100 buses. So kind of getting your foot out the door with electric and or propane or clean natural gas. But again, we're really trying to push for electric zero emission for these communities. Next slide, please. So with the rebate round just closing across the board, I cannot share like specific numbers, but I can say that Minnesota did not have the fewest number of submittals. So that was absolutely an improvement from last round. So the 2022 round. So absolutely applaud yourselves, pat on the back. Good. So far, it's looking really good. And across the region, Region 5 is like top in terms of number of submittals and such. And I will give actual numbers soon once we go through our end of processing and everything. So compared to last year, it's looking a lot better. We did a lot of outreach this year with attending a few events. We attended the Train the Trainer event last year up in St. Cloud. We recently were at the Minnesota School Board Association, and we're always looking for opportunities to get the word out on the program. And we're constantly looking to, with your feedback on how the program is going to be changing. So as of right now, with the 2024 planning, regionally, we are looking at meeting throughout February through March to kind of workshop and fine tune this program. We're definitely going to look at barriers on applying and bus prices, funding levels, timing of this application, leasing, if there's anything with that, how can we maybe fine tune that a little bit more, kind of look more into the utility language with the rebates. So we're still looking at what's going to happen for 2024. And the numbers for 2020 for this last rebate round will be released shortly. So those are my major updates. And if you have any questions about future rebates and how to apply and where you can find that information, you're welcome to reach out to me. I do run a coalition call that's actually meeting tomorrow morning at 9:30 Central Time. We talk through electric buses throughout the state. We have a lot of other stakeholders that give roundtable updates on their electric bus outreach, and a few of these folks on the call today are part of my coalition, and they've been very active members in getting the word out. So if you have any questions about transitioning your fleet, cold weather concerns, range anxiety, battery issues, just come to the coalition calls. We can definitely talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daphne. Yeah, usually we've had Daphne come speak brilliantly at so many different webinars. So really grateful for her expertise. And we're in a really interesting spot now where we just closed out a program. But calling way back to the first few slides, I said, this is very exciting news. This was the first time I heard that Minnesota we weren't the last, which is really exciting. So anyway, I'm hopeful and excited to hear those numbers as they're allowed to be given out. And I think Daphne might have mentioned this. If not, the EPA's, I guess why this is so exciting is because the EPA's rebate program is selected through a lottery process. So again, the more applications an entire state gets in, the higher chance we have of being selected. So this is exciting news. And I know lots of people on this call have worked really hard within their own district to help make that possible. So, anyway, talking about school districts, this is another really nice transition to our final speaker of the night, which is Brooke Roper. And I will pass it back over to Brooke.
Hello, all. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. It is such a great topic to be covering with my fellow coalition members. And I'll keep things, brief, but just wanted to talk about the power of school board members. As a newly elected school board member who, is still learning how to be a school board member, one thing that I know is that I have tremendous power to make a difference in my district. And not, school, when people think about school board members, I think that, right, we are the bosses of the teachers and we just tell people what to do and all of those things. And none of that is actually true, right? We just oversee the district operations and we set policies and we build autonomy for district leadership and staff to be able to do their work in a respectful manner and to do their work great and to have agency to do their work well. And so it is really important that we work with district staff and leaders and students and stakeholders to really push for climate change. And one of the ways that I do that is pushing for climate change is advocating for electric school buses. As Dr. Trujano has said, my son CJ, he goes to Hopkins. He's a Hopkins scholar, and he also is a kid with asthma. He was diagnosed pretty early. And so I got into the electric school bus game, fairly around like last year after my son had, like a year or two ago, after my son had his first asthma attack. And so as I was, as I was thinking of looking at ways to ensure that his asthma is well controlled and managed, electric school buses came up during my research. And so as I was researching, I began to look at the benefits of this, right? And especially as someone who was already into climate and environmental justice, this was a perfect segue for me to just jump right on and to make a difference. And so, so the way that I leverage my power as a school board member, I do it through the 5P advocacy model that I made up on my way when I was in my campaign. I thought about how can I effectively communicate to constituents? How can I effectively communicate to, students and community members and stakeholders in a very clear manner? And this was the way that I thought was just best. And so one way is, number one, is policy development. As school board members, we have the power to oversee policies and to review them in a very deep way and to say, hey, this is not right. We need to change this. We need to make this change. and to work with our monitoring committees and our superintendents, our assistant superintendents to do that. I'm on my monitoring committee, as my school board assignment. And so many of you who are school board members, every school district has a policy committee. And so if you are on a school board, if you have not received your assignment or you're thinking about getting into a new assignment, the policy committee will be a place where you're able to be very effective in ensuring that or drafting up policies that will help our districts mobilize and adopt electric school buses. And so it's just really about just doing a lot of research. You can go to at the house.gov and look at like the school transportation regulation, and they would just show you like the different buses and vehicles that's acceptable for school districts, and even just work from that document to show over to your district leadership and your administration. Say, hey, this is what the Minnesota government is saying or the Senate is saying. We need to adopt this. And just even working with some of your council members and community. I know that I'm constantly talking to my mayor. I'm constantly talking to different council members. So the report actually supported us with our testimony over at the Senate last year, talking about policy even at a state and federal level, because that what policy is set at the state and federal level can also trickle down into the school district. So policy development is going to be like number one, because what's policy is what's going to govern everything that we really do. Number two, promotion. I am constantly outside of my role as a school board member promoting electric school buses. Dr. Trajano and I and Paula, we have written op-eds for the Duluth Tribune. We have sat on panels for the Actualizing Equity with like the Alliance this summer. We did an interview with the amazing and honorable Al McFarland from Minneapolis, who is the chief who owns Insight News. And I'm currently getting us on a few more podcasts and getting us into a few more events to talk about electric school buses. And so just because you're on the school board and you think that you have to just keep your word through the school, no, please bring your promotion out into your communities. And so it's really, really important that you begin to talk to those community members and those stakeholders and those businesses, is just seeing, hey, can I host an event here talking about electric school buses? What can we do? What kind of collaboration can we have to promote this in our community? Look at the mutual benefits of this. Look at the mutual benefits of having, a event out in community, right? Also look at exercising your voice on the radio. The radio has thousands of people listening every day. Can you call into your radio station to talk about, electric school buses? It doesn't necessarily have to be on behalf of your district, because today I'm not speaking on behalf of Hopkins. I'm speaking on behalf of Brooke Roper, who is a school board member, and just letting you all know what I can do in my power to push electric school buses forward. So please, you utilize your community, utilize all media, public relations to push for electric school buses, because it's really needed. Partnerships is going to be very key. I cannot tell you, I cannot do any of this work without without Sanita, without Dr. Trajano, without Paula, without Kathy, without Finn, without Mike. We could not do this work together in a siloed way. This has to be a collaboration. So I really advise you all to really get into making partnerships with people and organizations, and to truly that would help build capacity for you to do the electric school bus work, because they may have access, your partners may have access to a network or to a community or to stakeholders that you don't have access to. And because you all are in partnership, there's the exposure for your work and their work. So please get into partnerships with people. Again, it does not have to be on behalf of your school district, but it really is good for you to talk to your fellow board members, your superintendent, and district leadership about getting into partnerships as a school district, because school districts hold so much power, and a partnership with the school district will hold so much weight, especially if we go up to the Senate together, especially if we go on the Hill together and we are, fighting together. It just shows a really huge benefit of unity when we have solid partnerships. And then I will also say public funding. I know for a fact, this is my first year, so I'm learning how to manage $100 million budget. Okay, like it's a lot of work, and there's so many different parts that plays into school budgets. And so oftentimes transportation does not have the biggest budget, right? Biggest budgets go towards like salaries and other things. And so that's why it's really important to look at those outside funding opportunities to promote to your transportation directors, to promote to, your board members, to let them know, hey, there's an EPA grant coming out that we can apply for. It doesn't necessarily have to be, from our budget, but we can go for this, right? So calling meetings and bringing your transportation director in, and also providing them with information about the outside funding is going to be really key to ensure that they are aware that they can apply for this and not feeling limited or not applying for electric school buses because they feel like it's going to be implicating the school budget. And so electric school buses are so serious that the American Lung Association is calling for the federal government to invest $20 billion into this, just because what Joshua was saying, that we are moving towards a zero emission economy. That's just where the world is going to combat climate change. Some states, California in 2030, I think you can't even drive a gas car through California pretty soon, right? So there's adoption, climate adoption is happening. And so we have to really roll with it. And that's the way you're going to have to frame it to your transportation directors when you are talking to them, because we have to get on board or we will be behind. And I can assure you that other countries, I can't think of the name of it, but are already like having 100% electric, transportation. So we really got to get on the ball here, because we are facing, I don't want to call it a crisis, because I feel like that word just really, instills fear in folks. So I want to just say that this is our climate resilience fight. And then, number 5, again, all of it kind of goes into your proactive advocacy. You just have to be a hardcore advocate when it comes to electric school buses. People are going to push back. People are going to say all types of things about electric school buses. They're going to talk about propane, and they're going to talk about all these other things. But the main key is that electric school buses is the healthiest option for our children. I actually showed Paula and Sunita a video when I was driving to Mississippi over the summer of a school bus full of children passing me by, and they stopped, and all of this black nasty smoke just came out of the exhaust pipe. My stomach turned so bad just thinking about all those kids who are inhaling those carcinogens, right? And carcinogens, if you all don't know, is an element that causes cancer in the living tissue. And for kids who have existing health issues, like my son who has asthma, and my daughter, who's 5, and she's, small, and, kids are getting sick and COVID and all this stuff. The last thing they need is to be breathing in some harmful emissions from diesel pipes. And so you have to frame it in that way where people are putting the children first, because the thing that they're going to say is, what about money? What about this? No, what about the kids, right? We have to make sure that they are coming first when we are making decisions. And so, especially, in the BIPOC community, we already know, well, we don't know. Most of you may not know, but, people who live in, the BIPOC communities are going to the emergency rooms 5 times higher than those who don't live in there, for air pollution related causes. And so we have to really take this serious. And then, we have to make sure that we are doing our absolute best to advocate for electric school buses and to be champions for the cause, because it's happening. And we have to just get running with it and rolling with it. And I'm all for it. And so, please, just let me know however I can support any of you in your quest of electric school buses. I'm here to be your advocate. I'm here to support however I can. And let's just get electric school buses mobilized and adopted in the state of Minnesota 100%. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Man, I am just like ready to go march myself down to the Capitol after that. That was so just, empowering and fantastic. And Brooke is a incredible advocate, and this is also, again, like she mentioned, CJ, Brooklyn, her kids, those kids, along with all of their classmates, are going to be getting on these school buses. I was actually I was speaking today with a 9th grade class in Roseville, and I asked them all what the first few things they thought of when they think about school buses, and all of them said smelly, dirty. Yeah, the big top ones were smelly, dirty, and then the yellow bus. So all that to say is that we want to eliminate 2 of those, and instead it can be a bright, quiet, no longer promote or emitting diesel bus. So anyway, with all of that, we have now gotten to the questions and answers section of the evening. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 2 seconds, just so I can see everybody. Also, if you can, like do a little, virtual is hard, but like little clapping emoji or something for all of our amazing speakers. They all did such a great job. And this is the section now for questions, if people have them. I will prioritize, I guess, right now, folks who are, yeah, to either raise your hand right now, and then I'll see it and I can call on you to speak. Otherwise, you could throw it in the chat, and I'll be playing some catch up right now with the chat. But does anyone have any questions in general or for a specific speaker?
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little more from Joshua, because I think you serve a lot of rural areas. And I know we're at the School Board Association, and some rural, more so than other districts, they seem to have some misinformation or a more negative thought about electric in general. How do you, what specifically do you, when you're talking to someone that maybe has questions about, oh yeah, these don't work up in rural Minnesota. What are some of the specific sort of facts that you share with them?
Yeah, well, my infrastructure, we don't have the infrastructure to charge them. Well, how many diesel buses do you have? I just had this conversation 2 weeks ago. We've got 42. What do you do when it's 35 below? Well, you see all those poles out there. Yeah, we got 220 in 65 poles. We can actually plug in 85 buses. Oh, you don't have the infrastructure to charge 2 electric buses.
Yeah, they already have the infrastructure. Yeah. I think one thing that Daphne has heard too is, people think, oh, we need to put it in a garage. And actually the oldest school bus in the upper Midwest is sitting here in our area in Lakeville. That has been parked since 2017 outside on a surface lot, being charged with a level 2 charger. Still operating extremely well today. I actually just talked with Schmitty and Sons, Daphne and I did a couple weeks ago. Still doing really well. Yeah, I mean, charging, even here in Minnesota, that's a 2017 bus. That doesn't have the range of the newer buses or the technology of the newer buses. Still operating in seventh year, being charged outside with a level 2 charger. So you could share that with folks too. Just, we have buses here in Minnesota that are doing just fine.
That brings up a good point, and I shared it with somebody in a private message here. Again, what about 40 below? That comes up constantly. And it's a simple question. Again, don't explain to them how I want you to. Explain to them what they're already doing. So at 40 below, what do you do with a diesel? Well, Gary gets in at 5 in the morning. He plugs them all in. He gets them all started up because they've been plugged in all night. Okay, so they've been plugged in all night. And then you get in at 4:35 in the morning. You start them up. You let them run for an hour and a half. Good news, the EVs, they're already plugged in and you can turn them on from your phone. You don't have to get there, So it's the same process, but the new process is scary, but it's the same.
Yeah, I appreciate you just sort of walking people through that. Yeah, it's something new, but there's a lot of benefits to it as well as, some of the stuff you're talking about. So yeah, thanks for doing that.
I am playing a little catch up within the chat, and I'm asking this to everyone, specifically a little bit to Joshua, but Milind, I think he had to leave early, but he had kind of asked that, and if it's already been answered in the chat, we can move on, but kind of he brought up the issue with batteries not maintaining their charge in the cold weather, and that hasn't been completely overcome quite yet. If you've had those conversations, Joshua, with more rural districts, how have you kind of navigated through those, and what information can you provide for them? And this also then can be open to others as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because like Daniel pointed out, the old ones, or I did our original IC bus. I mean, our electric one, we made it out of a diesel bus. The new one from the ground up is made to be electric. So our max range is 150 miles, right? So that puts it at about 120 to 130. If it's properly pre-tripped, just like you would properly pre-trip a diesel bus at 40 below, right? If it's not, and you hop in it cold, oh yeah, you're gonna get 60 miles out of it. But if you did that with a diesel bus, it would gel up and you would get 0 miles out of it, So again, when we look at the math, I don't want you to pick a 75, 80 mile route with the current electric bus. I want you to be happy with a 20 to 40 mile route, knowing that you have 100-mile range minimum. That range anxiety is real. People in our head, we think, well, I can just stop and fill it up. But the range isn't needed. In 90% of routes, it's just not needed. And with over that, again, a normal 150-mile range before regenerative braking. So in the cold, it's a non-issue. You just have to explain it correctly.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you for answering that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I saw that question. So what does it cost to replace a battery? So this is a 3-part question on how you purchase your vehicle. And I can only speak to international. So if you have a battery issue in the first 8 years of ownership with an international, it's covered under the warranty. So 0, right? If you lease your bus with one of our leasing companies like Highland, right, in your whole cycle, your 10-year cycle, it's $0. If the bus is doesn't work in 8 years from buying it with international, it's $0. From Highland for 10, it's $0. So if you buy the bus and you're gonna do a true end life of it, like we're gonna run this thing for 20 years. One, good luck getting DOT to pass a 19-year-old bus in Minnesota. It's most of them barely make it to year 10 or 12. And we're recommending it be a 10 to 12 at max with the electrics, because we want, like I said, it's 75% life in a battery is when you're going to get rid of your bus. It's not like a cell phone where you're down to 50% and you got to plug it in every 2 hours. Because that's going to have an end of life so every single grocery store, every single Target, they have generators on top of their buildings, diesel generators or propane ones. They're all switching to electric. They're low maintenance ones. That's where those batteries are going to go. There's companies out there waiting for EV batteries to buy them up, to turn them into generators. So if you have to replace a battery and it's not going to be under warranty, or it's not going to be under any plan, it would be like replacing an engine. It'd be that, $15,000 to $20,000.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joshua, for answering that. I also saw in the chat here that there's the discussion around solar on schools, state programs that help schools do an audit for ROI for solar panels. I know that it's been mentioned previously that that is still sort of fully hasn't been hatched out quite yet. And I apologize to do this fully, but Heidi, I did see that you threw something in the chat surrounding a possible resource for people. If you're at all comfortable with speaking on it, that would be awesome, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm with CERTS, and we do all the technical assistance for solar for schools through the MPCA program, or the state program. So Peter Lindstrom is the one doing that. He's probably the go-to for all of that information. And generally, it's just what I've seen from documents is kind of going through the program with the school, with the quote with the solar installer. And then they take away like all the incentives and credits and things, and then give you the payback period based on all of that. So it's a little different because the solar panels don't have, I would say, as much. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could argue like, electric buses don't have the upkeep of gas bus. So it's kind of like how much work do you need in the future, trying to figure that out, but yeah.
So how do you think who runs that program? Well, for solar on schools that does the calculation? Is it-
Peter Lindstrom's the one to go to with that. He would be able to tell you more about it.
Oh, okay.
But
He's with CERTS?
yep,
Oh, okay, thank you.
yeah. Yep, there's a whole page on the website. I think I put it in the chat, but there's a whole page there for it. We do have a small part about electric buses too on that same page.
Sorry, I'm just reading the chat now. Um, that is something actually the MPCA question is a very valid one, and that's one that I've been trying to fully figure out. And I think Daphne has hopped off since. But there was that article that went out surrounding the rest of the funding for the Volkswagen settlement. I have looked on the MPCA's webpage and I did not see the finalized plan. However, I could have missed something or another. But I think that, to my understanding, that was their estimate of potentially what could be done, because back in December, we submitted comments asking for them to prioritize electric school buses. And I know that actually her name is Lexi. She couldn't make it tonight, but I could include her contact information in the follow-up email for folks to kind of touch base with her on where exactly that's going. Unless secretly someone on this call is with the MPCA and wants to jump in. Okay, cool. And then, okay, back to the battery question. Okay. I don't know how to say that word. Dan, do you not mind asking your question in the chat?
Oh, yeah, I think it's probably for Joshua, because so at the end of the bus life cycle, 10, 12 years, people will scrap or salvage or potentially sell a diesel bus. Do you know how that compares with an electric bus? I might think that scrapping an electric bus, there might be a lot of value left, particularly in the battery. So you might even get more at the end of the life cycle back when you get rid of that. Have you seen any research on that? I'm not. I'm just curiosity of, after 10, 12 years of a bus, is it worth more than a 10, 12-year-old diesel bus?
I'm laughing because you take I'll use a 2012 International Cummins diesel bus with 120,000 miles on. Everybody knows a diesel engine will run to 300,000-400,000. That engine used is worth $5,000 to $10,000. A whole school bus with a functioning engine at 10 years is worth $1,500 scrap value to a junkyard. That's it. And that's like best case scenario most of the time. They're not usually, when they hit that, they're too rusted out. They're not worthy for the road. They need more updates. And they're salvaged or they're scrapped. So when we look at the steel value on a bus, if it was truly ready to get pulled apart at that 10-year cycle, the steel value is about $1,500 in scrap, just like a normal school bus. The companies out there, again, there's multiple companies that are working with EV battery makers for electric generators, for grocery stores, and for other industries. There's multiple companies out there that want the electric motors on the school buses for making wind and other solar and small application, that they can't afford a new one. They're not going to call International and say, "Hey, give us that $100,000 electric motor." They'll gladly pay $5,000-6,000 for a used one. So, and that doesn't even include the copper scrap out of it. I think people worried about like, well, the batteries are going to need to be recycled and it's hazmat. That's, if you were to take a battery to 20% life, yes, you're going to pay some hazmat fees, but that's not recommended or really feasible with the life cycle of a battery on a bus.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. Okay, I see another question. If does any school use the batteries to sell energy back to the grid? So I was just frantically trying, and I feel like this actually could be a question that
Yeah,
Daphne
I
could
think I
answer.
addressed that, Mary, when maybe you weren't on during my presentation. Yeah, that's not theoretical. That vehicle to grid is being used in multiple states, and I think Sunita was talking about Excel. It's on the PUC docket that they will likely be piloting this in Minnesota as well. In the slides, I think slide 14, there is a link to one district out in Beverly, Massachusetts, that studied this over 2 summers. They were doing this with the electric utility and selling back $11,750 of peak energy back to the utility during peak demand in the summer times. $11,750 per bus per summer. So it's working out there extremely well for them financially to not just use that bus as a transportation asset, but as a battery asset to support the grid and actually make revenue on that battery during the summer when school buses aren't being used as much. So great question. And I am looking forward to the day when that is now being done in Minnesota. And I can just envision a day when, we got 11,000 electric school buses in Minnesota that are plugged into the grid over the summer, supporting the peak demand energy and used as financial assets for schools to actually make money in the summer off that bus when they're not being used for transportation. Yeah, and I know that there's a great rural district in Wisconsin. I forgot that I was at a webinar just a couple weeks ago. That superintendent was the one, and he had said actually the students and the teachers were the one that helped them get solar on schools and now electric school buses, and they're using those bus batteries for the solar storage and with the utility company to use those bus batteries for peak demand. And they're just starting that up, and they're just so excited about it. We might have a link to that webinar too. I think Sunita, you could send out. That guy is great from rural Illinois, just doing some fantastic stuff out there.
Yeah.
Hey, Danielle, was that you that told me? Somebody told me about some electric school buses being used in an emergency situation to actually help power a facility when they had no power.
Yeah, I heard that from that same Illinois rural district, that they now have these service agreements with nursing homes and hospitals and emergency centers, that they will use those buses, bring them over for if there's power outage and they need cooling or something, or if they set up some ability to use that bus battery to plug into their electric system. But yeah, they're setting up these, I think he's not even charging anything for that. He's just doing that out of the sort of, yeah, this is a community asset. And if that ever happens, we want to be able to use that bus battery asset to serve the community. But yeah, that webinar, if you can find it, maybe send it out, because he was fantastic. And what they're doing out there in that community and in Illinois is great. It's an illustration of what really can be done, not only for kids' health, for their learning, but to use those bus batteries, for the grid and for the community benefit.
Yeah, I'll definitely plan on sending that out. I'll be sending a follow-up email, including this recording, to everyone on Monday. Are there any other questions in the room right now? Okay, well, I don't think I'm hearing any. But thank you everyone so much for coming. Huge thank you again to all of our amazing speakers. I know Daphne hopped off, but thank you so much, Joshua, Dan, Brooke, and everyone who's attended. And Mary, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I came late, so I'm not really sure if this was covered. I had seen actually your Dan, your slides, and I had presented that to my school board, and they applied for the EPA and didn't get it because of the, it's a more wealthy school district. But then they applied for the MPCA and got 3 buses this year.
Fantastic.
So it was
Congratulations.
very exciting.
Yeah. Are you
And-
Mounds View?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Are
So,
you on the board there, Mary?
What?
Are you on the board there, or do you just talk to the
No, but
board?
I did speak to the board last summer,
Yeah, thanks
not
so
last summer,
much.
2 summers ago, using your information. And it was kind of a slight board group, but I was disappointed because, we had elections this year and it was very split, but it wasn't, you had to really look into it, like who was representing what. So I voted for people that actually said that, we're not quite ready to do the buses yet. And I'm like, why? And I know that I needed to go with them because the alternative was a very, would have been destructive. So, but I didn't say anything. And then I knew that there was this application in there, and now they have them, so it's interesting. I had spoken to someone who belonged to a bus company that actually, I think Sanita, he came out to the park one day and did something, and you had him speak. And I talked to him, and he told me at that time that they had applied, he was helping Mounds View apply. So long story, now I'm wanting to know, that's why I asked about, are they still going to have buses through MPCA and money for that? And then the second thing is EPA's process still the same? Because I know they've been kind of like revamping and doing, and I was so excited about it, and I got Mounds View going, and then our state didn't get anything that first year. You know what I'm saying? I'm so excited for St. Paul this year. So it'll happen, but I don't want to encourage people to spend all the time to apply if really we don't have a chance. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's good that they're going to support the districts that don't have as much money. That I understand that, but anyway.
Yeah, great points, Mary. I'll weigh in here, and I think Brooke's presentation is just perfect because you hit all those P's, I think, that Brooke was talking about. So yeah, the EPA program does change, and they look at feedback. So that first year when we got hardly any money, they gave all of that money to prioritize districts. Unfortunately, St. Paul did apply for like 24 buses that year. They were the only prioritized district that first year in Minnesota. And they were unlucky and they didn't get the rebate lottery pick. They have changed it. There are more priority qualifying districts that can certify that large districts like Minneapolis and Hennepin and Rochester are large enough where they can say, yeah, we have Title I schools that are deserving and we are going to use those buses, and they become priority to get the priority funding and prioritization. And then they changed the rebate round this year to actually say they might actually give 40% of the available funds to non-priority districts. We don't exactly know, but up to 40% might be given to non-priority districts. They just won't get as high of funding. So the rebate round that just closed on the 14th, if you missed it, you missed it. There is a much better chance the second round than the first, because they're saying that up to 40% of the dollars will be given to non-priority districts like Mounds View. So I hope you applied. Nick knows all of this, I'm sure. Nick Martini, who you talked with, who runs your bus transportation group, North Star. So hopefully you guys applied and have a chance at getting some of that money this year, which you didn't last year.
Okay, great. Thanks. Oh, and by the way, I just heard a rumor from the transportation guy in Mounds View district, that Irondale might have a geothermal project. I know that's not electric, but I'll tell you what, we heat all our buildings with gas. And that's one part that isn't being covered. And it's a huge deal if we start just using the coolness of the earth to heat and cool our buildings. So
Awesome.
Great stuff going on in that area. Thank you, Mary, for following Brooke's slide there and doing all that advocacy.
Well, I was following your slides actually, and it was last year. I was on the New Brighton action team, doing a climate action plan this year. So I've kind of been AOL. I told Sunita I was going to be out of commission, but I just went to one meeting, I think.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of what that impact can have. And thank you so much for sharing, Mary. And so exciting with Mounds View. Well, recognizing that there's just about a few minutes left, I will close us out with just sharing that for kind of what some next steps can be if folks want to remain engaged. If this is something you are interested in learning more about, feel free to send me an email. It is my first name, Sonita, SONITA, @mn350.org, to talk one-on-one about what is going on in your school district, because every school district is different, but we can get it done for all of them. You can also leave your email in the chat if you would like to participate in a training. We have a lot of new faces that have been coming in, and a training will happen in around March to kind of go over what you should do when you're talking to your school board, what to expect. Because like so many people have said, this conversation is very important to start early on. Even if there's not a grant program or a rebate program open, like I mentioned at the beginning, we have a lot coming through this year. And then I will also, like I mentioned before, send a recording of this webinar to everyone on Monday, and feel free to forward it on to your school district staff members along with school board members to help get the word out. So anyways, I will let everybody go from here. But thank you so much for spending your Thursday evening with us. No, you could have been lots of places, but it really means so much that you came to listen. And hopefully we could get all of the students in Minnesota on diesel-free electric school buses. All right. Well, I will see you all later. Have a good rest of your night. All right. Bye.